15 years ago, my ex-husband cheated on me with his childhood friend, and even had a child with her, leading to our divorce. After the divorce, I suffered harassment from his affair partner, and was eventually forced to quit my job. When I was at my lowest, my current husband rescued me, and we've built a happy family and live a peaceful life. But the happiness was short-lived. I unexpectedly ran into my ex-husband who abandoned me 15 years ago. "You're still single, aren't you?" He sneered. "No one would marry a woman who can't have kids. You still can't say anything but nasty comments, can you?" I shot back. "Unlike someone, my son is adorable like his mother." Looking down on me with a smug smile, he retorted, "Oh, really? He's very cute indeed. Oh, I should introduce my kids to you too." As I introduced my son, his smile faded and he began to tremble. "My name is Emily Johnson. I'm 38 years old this year. I live with my 13-year-old son, Kyle, my 11-year-old daughter, Lily, and my husband of the same age, Mike." Kyle, a middle school freshman, is right in the middle of his rebellious phase. He's been quite mouthy lately, but when he really doesn't listen, Mike steps in and sets him straight. Lily, my daughter, loves makeup and clothes and is quite the fashionista. Being the youngest, she's very good at getting her way. My son Kyle, who adores his sister Lily, quickly panics and apologizes whenever she tells him, "If you're not nice to Mom, I'll start disliking you." He hurriedly says, Sorry. Look, I'll get along with Mom, okay?" He's honest and always livens up the atmosphere. Though noisy, we live happily. But actually, I'm a divorcee, and this is my second marriage. I divorced due to my ex-husband's despicable betrayal. It was 15 years ago when I was in a senior-junior relationship with my ex-husband John in college. We were blessed and had a smooth sailing relationship as we had many mutual friends. Soon after getting married, we both wanted children, and would talk about how nice it would be to have them, even dreaming about dressing them up in matching outfits. However, reality wasn't so kind, and a year passed without us having a child. Each month when my period came, it strained our relationship, which neither of us liked, so we had many discussions and even underwent expensive fertility treatments. But when told there was nothing wrong, our marital relationship didn't improve. Initially, John was supportive and cooperative, but as time passed without a child, his attitude towards me began to change. He'd throw sarcastic comments like, "When will I ever become a father?" As if it was all my fault we didn't have kids. We didn't have kids. He stopped helping with household chores altogether, leaving me to do all the cooking, washing dishes, laundry, and cleaning. When I asked, "Why have you suddenly stopped helping with the chores?" "You used to help." He said, "Since you're infertile, if you don't at least do the housework, you're not fulfilling your role as a woman." What's the point of our marriage then? His words became increasingly thorny over time. My sister and her husband are already expecting their second child. Isn't that great? They're on their second, and we don't even have our first. Right? He would glare at me with harsh eyes, mocking and despising me. "If you had a normal body, I would have been a father long ago. How can you say I'm not normal when we don't even know the cause yet?" But John retorted, "Infertility is always the woman's fault. Don't you even know that? If I had known you were infertile, I would never have married you." Show some remorse. His words pierced my heart. I also started receiving calls from my in-laws saying we want to see our grandchild soon. At first I brushed it off, saying it's only been a year. These things take time, but maybe that was a mistake because my mother-in-law's attitude became harsher. She'd say, "You're useless if you can't have children." My daughter had one right away. "You're the only defective one." I felt pressured every day. One day, my close friend Sarah invited me out for drinks. John had been saying he was busy with work and coming home late, so I thought a break would be good and accepted the invitation. Then Sarah revealed a shocking truth. "I've wanted to see you for a long time, Emily. There's something I need to tell you. I've missed you too. So what did you want to talk about?" "Emily, do you remember Jessica?" Jessica was John's childhood friend. They lived near each other as kids and their parents were close. Jessica and I went to the same university, and now she works at my company. She's the president's daughter and got her job through connections. Jessica and I weren't particularly close in college, as we were in different clubs and departments, and we barely interacted at work. John once introduced me to her saying, "She's my girlfriend, so be nice to her." But she glared at me, perhaps not wanting to lose her childhood friend, so I thought she disliked me and kept my distance. Tall and beautiful, she was popular enough to be in beauty pageants in college and was somewhat of a celebrity in the company, being the president's beautiful daughter. Jessica? Oh, John's childhood friend? Yeah, I know her. She's beautiful. We're at the same company, but we don't interact much. What about her? Well, it's hard to say, but I think Emily, your husband John, and Jessica are having an affair. What? I was shocked by Sarah's warning, feeling like I'd been struck by lightning. I saw them the other day. They were walking hand in hand, not like just friends. That can't be. You should check it out. And call me if anything happens, okay? Thanks for telling me. I had a feeling that John was cheating. His attitude towards me was terrible, and he always came home late, claiming to be working overtime. On weekends, he'd say he was entertaining clients and wouldn't be home. I had a vague idea, but I pretended not to notice. That day, after parting ways with Sarah, I headed straight to a private investigator. The reason, of course, was to gather evidence of my husband's infidelity. It didn't take more than a week to gather evidence, but I myself wasn't ready to decide on divorce right away. No matter how terrible a husband he was the person I once vowed to spend my life with. I couldn't decide right away. A few days later, I returned home to find John, who usually came home late, sitting at the dining table. "Oh, you're home. Yeah, I thought you'd be late today, as usual." I tried to sound sarcastic on purpose. "Yeah, sorry about that. I need to talk to you." Having heard about the affair from Sarah, I had a bad feeling. "I want a divorce." "What?" "So that's how it is." I realized that John wasn't just fooling around with Jessica, but that he was serious. "Jessica's pregnant, so I'm gonna marry her." "Jessica, your childhood friend? You said she was just a friend, and now she's pregnant? You were having an affair?" "Don't call it an affair. Makes me sound like a scumbag. Can't be helped, right? Jessica can actually get pregnant, and she's beautiful. There's no reason for me to choose you over her." I was shocked by John's brazen attitude. He didn't think he was in the wrong at all. I was so shocked that I couldn't find the words to speak. Seeing me silent, John scoffed and said, "Even my mom kept nagging me to divorce you. She always liked Jessica more. She's beautiful, kind, and can have kids. My mom will be happy with this." In the end, my mother-in-law and husband had always preferred Jessica. I was so sad that tears started to flow. Well, I've packed my things and I need to leave for the sake of the child that's about to be born. Saying that, John left the house. I didn't have the energy to stop him. Later, I was unilaterally sent divorce papers. There was a note attached, written by a woman. "Please divorce my husband quickly." The contradictory words made question marks pop up over my head. I wanted to retort, "You're the one who stole my husband." Seeing those words, I finally came to my senses. Why am I the one being blamed? I couldn't just silently go through with the divorce. With that thought, I took the evidence I had gathered from the private investigator and filed for divorce mediation. A few days after filing, I received a call from an unknown number. Wondering who it could be, I answered the phone to hear a woman's voice screaming, "What do you think you're doing? Why are you suing us?" It was Jessica, the affair partner. Well, it's obvious, isn't it? I know all about your infidelity. It's only natural for me to ask for alimony. Alimony? I have a baby in my belly. You're really going to demand money at a time when we'll need it most. Who's the real monster here? You sleep with a married man and have the nerve to say that to me. It's your fault for being infertile, you terrible woman. Her high-pitched screaming hurt my ears. Anyway, I intend to settle this divorce, including alimony, in court. Let's discuss this further in the proper setting. With that, I hung up the phone. Later, thanks to the evidence I had, the mediation recognized John and Jessica's relationship as adultery. John, unhappy with this, tried to blame my infertility, but it was dismissed as unreasonable since no test results had confirmed me as the cause within just a year of marriage. I received $40,000 in alimony from John and $20,000 from Jessica, both paid in one lump sum. I didn't want a prolonged, messy payment schedule and a lingering connection to them. This is how our divorce was finalized. However, my suffering didn't end there. Since John, Jessica, and I all attended the same university, the affair scandal became a topic of gossip among many friends. According to a close friend, the rumor was that I had hidden my infertility and tricked John into marriage. Some people even sympathized with John and Jessica. How awful. Jessica and I worked at the same company, and she spread unfounded rumors there too. Everyone sided with Jessica, who is beautiful and the boss's daughter. She tearfully played the victim, saying Emily is such a terrible person, taking money from us for alimony when we're about to have a child, even though she hid her infertility. At first, I tried to ignore it, but being the boss's daughter, Jessica got preferential treatment. My boss would scold me, "Don't be mean to Jessica," and despite my hard work, I was progressively left out of major projects. Eventually, I was mentally cornered and chose to resign. While I was looking for a new job, I received a headhunting offer from another company. They said, "We need someone as diligent and talented as you." At my new job, I was amazed at how freely I could work. My new boss paid close attention to each employee. There was none of that favoritism or nepotism like at my previous company. I found myself drawn to this wonderful boss. That's how I met my current husband, Mike. When I was at my lowest after a terrible split from my ex-husband, he kindly supported me. After several dinners together, we started talking not just about work, but about our personal lives too, and our relationship developed. Things went well between us, and thankfully Mike proposed to me. However, having been rejected by my ex-husband for infertility, I had many fears about marriage and confessed to Mike that I might be infertile. Then, looking at me earnestly, Mike said, "Of course, I'd be happy if we could have a child together in the future. But the most important thing is that I love you, Emily. You're important to me. So even if we can't have children, I will always be by your side." He hugged me gently. I was so happy. I thought I wanted to spend my life with this man and decided to marry Mike. Soon after our marriage, we had our first child, Kyle, followed by our daughter, Lily. Perhaps not getting pregnant with my ex-husband was a matter of timing or compatibility. Raising children is hard, but we're living happily. Then one day, I attended a friend's wedding. During the middle of the ceremony, when it was time for greetings and mingling, I stepped out to go to the bathroom and saw my ex-husband, John, whom I hadn't seen in 15 years. Why is he here? I panicked for a moment, my mind going blank. But then I remembered that today's bride and groom were friends from college. It made sense for John to be there. I tried to ignore him and walk past, but he called out loudly, "Hey!" So he noticed me. "What? You've put on weight, haven't you? It's been so long since I've seen you." John, seemingly drunk, talked loudly and spat while speaking. "You haven't changed a bit," I added in my mind, still as unpleasant as ever. Then John called his family over. There was Jessica and their son. Seeing my face, Jessica smirked and said, "Oh, it's been a while. Have you gained weight? Is it stress eating? Must be tough. I bet you're still an infertile woman with no one to take care of you, right?" I was dumbfounded by their rude behavior and couldn't find the words to respond. I noticed their son hanging his head, blushing with embarrassment. He had very handsome features. I forgot to introduce him. "This is my son. As you can see, he's cute like Jessica, right?" Jessica, too, proudly bragged about their son. "He's handsome, smart, a real genius. Sorry to say, it seems like we're the only happy ones here." They praised their son and looked down at me with smug smiles. However, their son seemed unhappy with his parents' behavior, seemingly displeased with them belittling someone else. He must be a very kind boy, I thought, but I had no time to deal with them. As I turned to leave, John grabbed my arm tightly, stopping me. "So you caused our divorce because of your infertility, and then you have the nerve to extort money from us?" John was still holding a grudge about something that happened 15 years ago. If anyone should hold a grudge, it's me. Then Jessica also turned to me and said, "Yeah, you're a single, infertile woman. Why would you need money? Families with children like us need it more, don't you think? Pay us back double the amount you took from us at that time." I was dumbstruck by such selfish remarks. and was left speechless when John and Jessica's son spoke up. Single means unmarried, right? But she's wearing a wedding ring on her left hand. Pointed out by their son, John and Jessica stared intently at the ring on my left ring finger. What? You're married? John and Jessica's loud exclamations drew stares from the surrounding people. I was mortified. As I pondered what to do, I caught sight of a familiar face. You shouldn't be so loud at a celebration like this. It's disturbing others. Maybe you should be more considerate? Mom, who are these scary-looking people? Kyle and Lily. Yes, worried about my late return, Kyle and Lily had come to check on me. Lily, as usual, was outspoken, but it was rare for Kyle to speak so provocatively. Mom, you're late coming back. Eh? Man? You have kids? Yes, I do. Let me introduce them. This is my son, Kyle, and my daughter, Lily. John seemed speechless, shocked that his ex-wife, whom he thought was infertile, had 2 children. Jessica was staring intently at my son. After a while, she muttered in a strained voice, "That uniform." She seemed fixated on my son's attire. Ah, he came straight from school with his dad. It's not about that. That's the uniform of that famous private middle school. Huh? Oh yes, Kyle's attending that prestigious private middle school. Private middle school. Yes, Kyle excelled in his studies and was attending a well-known local private school. Can't be. A child of yours at that school. And my daughter, too. She plans to take the exam for the same school next year. That's right. And you know what? Kyle is amazing. He won a violin competition. Violin? I thought I recognized this boy. Wasn't he on TV recently? Oh, you saw that? Yes, he's been getting a lot of media attention lately. Today, he's coming back from violin practice. Impossible. That can't be. John and Jessica were left gaping, frozen in shock. You were supposed to be infertile. How could you have such? I calmly addressed John's confusion. I'm glad to see you two seem happy. As you can see, I'm filled with happiness, too. Let's not involve each other anymore. We have nothing to do with each other now. As I was about to leave with my children, my husband, Mike, appeared. Hey, what's going on here? The main event is about to start again. Seeing my husband, John's face turned pale. President Smith? What? Jessica, too, upon seeing my husband, turned white and trembled. Your husband is Smith, the young CEO of ABC Corporation who got the job last year, right? Actually, my husband, Mike, works as the CEO of the parent company of Jessica's father's company. He was job hunting when the parent company approached him for a position. And that's how he switched jobs. I met Mike there, a man who was already popular and skilled. Last year, he was recommended by the then CEO and took over the role. Yeah, it's Smith. What's with this atmosphere? What happened? Sensing the uneasy air, my husband Mike looked puzzled, and that's when Kyle spoke up. These people were saying mean things about our mom, calling her infertile and fat, so Lily and I came to help her. They heard it. Kyle and Lily had overheard my ex-husband and his wife making rude comments about me. That's why Kyle had spoken up like that. You guys are those... The word infertile seemed to click something in Mike's mind, and his expression turned grim. I had heard rumors, but never imagined they were this insensitive. Then, John suddenly started to defend himself to Mike. No, I mean, Mr. Smith, I would never say anything bad about your wife, right? Jessica, why are you groveling so much? She's just his wife, right? I was the one who got yelled at by my father and suffered a lot because you made me pay her money. Me paying her money for our affair. I'll never forgive you now, Jessica. What are you saying? If he dislikes us, our subcontracting company is finished. Think about that. Realizing it was bad to be disliked by the CEO of our parent company, John started to flatter Mike, but Jessica, not satisfied, started arguing with him. What a ridiculous scene. Then John and Jessica's son, who had been silent, burst out, "Stop it. Listening to you both is terrible. You're saying awful things about her, calling her fat and infertile, and now demanding money back. I'm ashamed. And what about this affair? Am I a child born out of an affair? Am I unwanted?" His voice cracked with tears. John and Jessica started to fumble for words. Well, that's not As I realized the guests were staring at us, Jessica, noticing their gazes, blushed and looked down. Although I still can't forgive John and Jessica, their son seems to be a just and kind boy. He's innocent in all this. Thinking this, I was about to comfort their son when my husband Mike spoke first. Thank you. You stood up for my wife. You really are a kind boy, he said, gently patting the boy's head. I followed with a smile. But maybe I am a bit overweight. That's not true, I said, stroking my belly. Well, actually, I'm pregnant. My belly's getting bigger. I'm currently pregnant with our third child and on maternity leave. Seeing the boy with tears in his eyes, I added, your mom took great care of you in her belly, just like this. You're not unwanted. Your parents love you and are proud of you, right? I looked at John and Jessica. The boy then asked them, really? In a hurry, they both nodded vigorously and said, yeah, you're our pride and joy. Absolutely. You mean everything to us. At this, the boy immediately broke into a wide smile. Seeing their son smile, I also felt a sense of relief. Let's just remember that today is a day for celebration. Let's all head back to our seats, I said, as each family returned to their respective seats. And so, the turbulent scene came to a close. As the wedding ended and we were heading to the station, Jessica and John came up, holding hands with their son. Kyle and Lily had been intimidating the two who had insulted me, but Mike calmed them down with a wry smile. We're sorry. We're really sorry. It's too late, but for everything before and for today. Today, we're truly sorry. And thanks for earlier, for our son. It was the first apology I had heard from them in over 15 years. Perhaps even people as terrible as them had changed a little after having a child. I laughed, really, it's too late now. Well then, with just that, I turned and started walking away. Kyle offered to carry my bags. Lily said here and draped a jacket over my shoulders. Even as children, they were considerate of my pregnancy. All right, how about we make Dad's favorite hamburgers for dinner tonight? Kyle and Lily's favorite. Yay, thank you. With a vow to protect the smiles of my beloved family, I was moving away from the pains of the past. I'll take the house, the savings, and the pension. You can just go into a facility. Understood. These were the final words from my husband of 35 years on the last day of our marriage. Instead of appreciating my worn-out body after years of raising children, taking care of parents, and working tirelessly, my husband left me in a miserable state at the end. I wonder what the past 35 years were all for. He shoved everything onto me while he went out to drink. He took for granted everything I did, never once offering a word of thanks. I can't believe I put up with it all for 35 years. I have to admit, I'm pretty impressed with myself. But from now on, I'm gonna live my life. It's time for him to feel the misery, I decided. My name is Susan Anderson. I'm 60 years old. I work part-time at a food company's factory. My husband's name is Larry Anderson. He's 65 years old. We met through an introduction by an acquaintance. I was 25 when we married. This year marked our 35th anniversary. We began our relationship encouraged by friends to start dating after several group outings, which were trendy back then. After meeting several times, we came to think that if we were going to marry, it would be with each other. Marrying just seemed like the natural next step. Once we started living together, it turned out that Larry had no savings. In the beginning, we lived together in a small apartment. I mainly covered the living expenses. Larry's salary was low, and feeling anxious about the future, I didn't quit my job and continued working. That meant there were times when I couldn't do household chores because of overtime work. You're late. I'm starving here. Were you waiting? You could have eaten first. What are you talking about? There's nothing to eat. How am I supposed to eat? Larry rarely had to work late and usually came home earlier than I did, but he never did any housework. Housework is the woman's job, right? Oh, come on. That's not the era we live in anymore. That was the time when women were starting to be more active in society. I often saw the term career woman on talk shows, but Larry always said that household chores were women's work. I would have preferred to be a full-time housewife, but financially, that was difficult. A modern woman had to balance both work and home life. Larry had a way of interpreting things conveniently for himself, quite unlike the traditional authoritative husband. Instead of me having the freedom, it was Larry who often went out drinking. If you're going to be late, at least let me know. Cut it out. It's my time. I can do what I want with it. His tone became even harsher when he came home drunk. While I couldn't freely use my own time and money, Larry was enjoying his. I feel like I'm getting the short end of the stick. I was so frustrated that within the first year of marriage, the thought of divorce crossed my mind. When I talked to my mother about it, she strictly opposed it, saying divorce was out of the question. I didn't have the courage to divorce either, worried about what other people would think. Living together meant making an effort to accept both the good and the bad, I kept telling myself. Then Larry, as soon as he got his paycheck, would go out drinking and was just spinning his wheels at work. He never did any overtime, let alone a side gig, even if he had the time. He just kept on going out for drinks or heading straight home after work. And when he came home to find me not there, he'd say, "I hate it when I come home and my wife isn't there. It stresses me out to see the lights off through the window. But sometimes I have to work late. What's the point of a woman working overtime? Change your job." Larry went behind my back and called my employer to get me fired. My boss, not wanting to get dragged into anything weird, or maybe he wanted me gone from the start, it's unclear, encouraged me to resign. It became awkward to stay at the company, so I quit. It was such a struggle to get that job in the first place, and now I had to start looking for work again. By this point, having resigned from 2 companies, I wasn't even getting past the application screenings. Larry, seeing me flustered, said, "Part-time's fine, isn't it? I'm full-time after all." I was never the career woman type, so I didn't linger on the past, but I did worry if his salary alone was enough. So I took on 2 part-time jobs. I was a morning cleaner and a cashier at a grocery store. On days I knew Larry would be home late, I worked overtime at the store. When Larry was home, I'd be there, but when he wasn't, I had the freedom to work. He wasn't, I worked hard. Years went by living like this. I could endure it because I thought he needed me. At the time, I thought it was sweet that he wanted me to be home when he got back. A year after we got married, I gave birth to our eldest son. This apartment is too cramped. Yeah, when the kid gets to elementary school age, he'll want his own room and he might even want siblings. Around that time, Larry's mom suggested moving in together. Larry's mother was a divorced, single mother. She must have felt lonely after her only child, Larry, got married and left the house. It'll be killing 2 birds with 1 stone, won't it? We won't have to pay rent. I'm sure that's what his mother had told him. I wanted some time to think. Mom had already started getting things ready, you know? I was shocked to find out they had already prepared a room for my son, changing the wallpaper and all. I had wanted to keep my part-time job, so I agreed without giving it much thought. But I was too naive. My mother-in-law made me the target of her daily snide remarks. It's a shame for a child to have a mother working so hard. In my day, that was unthinkable. She'd never worked. After her divorce, she relied on her parents' help to raise Larry. Her parents had some wealth, so money wasn't an issue. Now she lives off a modest pension and her parents' inheritance. Although she seemed to be a bit of a spendthrift. She would spend money on her hobbies and on Larry and his son, but she never extended that generosity to me. Meals were prepared for everyone but me, and no matter where they went, I was always left behind. I am grateful that she took care of my grandchild. And since she cooked for Larry, I didn't need to be home when he returned. You can work full-time now. Overtime is okay too. What? Why all of a sudden? Since Mom is here, you can go work. I realized how selfish it was. In the end, when he said he wanted someone at home, it wasn't about wanting me there, but about having someone take care of things for him. I started working as a temp after dropping my son off at daycare. Luckily, my mother-in-law was happy to pick him up, so I could rely on her to get him home. It was a relief not to get complaints, even when the overtime kept up. After about 10 years of this, my mother-in-law started acting strangely. "Who are you? A burglar?" "I know it. Larry, call the police." "It's me, Susan." She had developed Alzheimer's disease. She completely saw me as the enemy. She often didn't recognize Larry or her grandson. One day after wandering off, she had an accident and ended up bedridden. "It's your fault Mom got like this. You take responsibility and look after her?" "How is it my fault?" "It's because you work late into the night." But you were the one who said it was okay for me to work. We couldn't stop fighting. I thought about taking my son and leaving, but I couldn't abandon my mother-in-law, so I decided to endure it. Besides, my son liked both Larry and his grandmother. I couldn't talk to him about it. My mother-in-law, who never accepted me as family, complained daily while I took care of her. Even when I consulted Larry about it, he brushed it off in one sentence. It can't be helped, she has dementia. I quit my job and became increasingly isolated. My mother-in-law, who seemed to enjoy mistreating her daughter-in-law, didn't become kinder to me, whom she saw as a stranger with dementia. I had hoped, but it was a pipe dream. She must have always disliked me from the start. But to my son, she was still his dear grandma. I continued to care for my mother-in-law alone until she passed away. After she died, and my son became independent, only Larry and I were left in the house. Next year, Larry is set to retire. I was looking forward to traveling and going out with just the two of us. But then Larry hit me with something unbelievable. It's written out for me. Just sign it and submit it yourself. A divorce paper? You can tell by looking at it. You're really slow, you know? That's what was so annoying about you. I felt like I had been struck on the back of my head. I felt like I was going to collapse. Why? Did I do something to deserve a divorce? Well, if I had to say, I don't want to spend the rest of my life with you. What do you mean? Larry looked at me and smirked. I've got someone I want to marry. Turns out Larry had a mistress. And it seemed like their affair had been going on for years. She was 20 years younger than me. So, you were cheating on me while I was taking care of your mother and raising our child? It seems that way. I was about to explode with anger at Larry's indifferent answer. While I was enduring my mother-in-law's verbal abuse, raising a child and dealing with loneliness, sacrificing what I wanted to do and working hard all by myself, Larry was fooling around with his mistress. I wish I didn't know that. You've been deceiving me all this time. I'll never forgive you. What are you going to do about it? You can't do anything anyway. Larry scoffed at me with contempt. So you're going to divorce me and be with that woman? She's much younger and better than you. I understand. Then I'll sign the divorce papers. But just so you know, I'll be asking both of you for alimony. Fine by me, I'll pay whatever. I have my mom's inheritance. Oh, but I'm not splitting the assets, just so you know. I thought it over for a moment. I had some savings of my own. I didn't want Larry or his mistress to get their hands on it. Alright, alimony will do. But let's make it clear, my assets are off the table. Then Larry burst out laughing. Your money is peanuts. I don't need that. With a lawyer present, we signed the papers agreeing not to divide the property, and we got divorced. I received $60,000 in alimony. It seemed to be paid in a lump sum from my mother-in-law's inheritance. He probably wanted to start a new life with his mistress as soon as possible. To sever ties with me, he settled the hassle with money. After the lawyer left, Larry said to me, I'm taking the house, the savings, and the retirement pay. You should just go to some facility. Then I really did check into the facility. It wasn't because Larry told me to. I thought it would make my golden years more enjoyable. The house was originally Larry's family home, and I had nowhere else to live. My sister and her husband were living in my family home, and I didn't want to impose on my son and his wife. I knew Larry had no savings, so splitting any assets would have been pointless. More than that, I wanted to get the divorce over with. And I was confident I could make it on my own from here on out. The inheritance from Larry's mother went to him, and I was content with just the alimony. Months later, one day Larry showed up at the facility. I hadn't told him my current address. He shouldn't have known I was at the facility. He must have used a professional agency to find out, I guess. What could he possibly want so badly that he had to go through all that trouble? There are other residents in the facility. I had him wait outside on the terrace. When I saw Larry sitting on the terrace from a distance, looking around helplessly, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pity. What on earth did I ever see in this man to marry him? It's a mystery to me. Sorry to keep you waiting. What do you want? What's this all about? Larry confronted me, not even bothering with a greeting. I knew what had surprised him, but I played dumb. Why did you come all of a sudden? How did you find this place? You were impossible to get in touch with. It took me a long time to find out. You didn't tell our son either, did you? He didn't know anything. Well, he has his own family now. It would be wrong to bother them. Besides, you haven't answered my question. How did you find out about this place? I asked a private detective. Private detective. They found out for me when I said I needed to contact you about the alimony. An ex-husband can be quite useful, huh? I figured as much that he used a professional. Really, which detective agency was it? I felt angry about the privacy intrusion, but I kept my cool. Anyway, why on earth can someone like you afford to live in such a fancy place? That was the reason for Larry's surprise. After our divorce, I found this upscale facility I had wanted to enter with Larry for our retirement and moved in alone. This upscale facility I'm living in isn't your typical nursing home. It's more like a luxury condo with a hospital attached. There's even a dining hall with meals prepared by a nutritionist, and during the day I have a great time with the other residents and the helpers. Of course, I can be alone if I want, and once a day, someone comes by to check if I haven't fallen or anything. There's even an emergency button in my room for when something happens. This place costs like $2 million, right? How do you have that kind of money? Actually, I've been investing for our retirement since we got married, for about 35 years. I lost my job in 1991, which drained my savings and left me panicked. Life is unpredictable. I realized saving money wasn't enough, so I started learning about investing. I didn't want to seem greedy, so I never told Larry, who I was dating at the time. At first, I invested a little at a time. After getting married, wanting to enjoy delicious food and travel with Larry in our retirement, I began investing more seriously. Since we both worked, I used a bit of my own money to invest. I sacrificed outings with friends, fine dining, shopping, and travel. All the money I could spend freely went into investments. After 35 years of diligent investing, I was able to amass a great fortune. When I told Larry about it, he said, "Then that money is partly mine too." I knew he would say something like that. "Sorry, but I can't give you any of my money." "Why not? I'm your ex-husband. It should be part of my assets too. You gave up that claim yourself, right in front of a lawyer. Have you forgotten? Damn, that's why you wanted a lawyer." "He tricked me. Who has been deceiving him all this time, I wonder?" Larry looked frustrated, his face twisting in disappointment. Feeling like it was a waste of time to continue this conversation, I urged Larry to leave. "No way, I'm not leaving. I'm gonna live here too." I was so astonished that I was at a loss for words. After a while, a security guard from the facility arrived, and I had them remove Larry from the premises. They took Larry away. It seems that one of the residents, noticing my distress, had called the security guard. Despite his repeated attempts to visit me, Larry's disruptive behavior eventually got him banned from the facility. He was put on the blacklist. However, I was curious about why he was so desperate to see me, so I contacted my son. According to my son, Larry apparently has debts. After our divorce, Larry planned to marry his mistress. But when the mistress found out he had paid alimony to me, she was furious. To win back her affection, Larry spent a lot of money on her. Even so, she didn't marry him but continued to take his money until she switched to a younger man. "Are you dumping me? After everything I've given you?" It was too late for regrets. The mistress dumped Larry without a second thought. She had lost interest in a penniless Larry. In the end, Larry was just a convenient source of funds for her. It was probably the younger man who was her real target all along. I couldn't imagine a woman 20 years his junior seriously planning to marry someone like Larry. Larry alone believed in the marriage with his mistress, which must have been a big shock to him. In the end, Larry, who had squandered his parents' inheritance and was in debt, was left alone with only the house. That house is over 70 years old. It's falling apart everywhere, but he has no money to repair it. He's still living there alone in the rundown house. My son expressed no intention of offering a helping hand. Recently, a city official told him to at least repair the exterior because it was causing trouble for the neighboring houses. Larry lost it and caused such a scene that the police got involved. My son went to pick up his father at the police station, but told him it was the end of their relationship. "You're abandoning me too?" Larry said, while crying and begging. His son had shrugged him off. Feeling abandoned by his son, I thought he was a miserable man. Due to an incident involving the police at his house, he became the subject of scorn in the neighborhood, and it seems he now spends his weekends cooped up at home. After updating me on Larry's situation, my son asked that I give him a call sometime, showing he still cared in his own way, which made me happy. Sometime after the call with his son, Larry himself called me. When I ignored that too, he called the facility directly. Such tenacity, the staff at the facility were concerned too. I decided to answer the phone just once. "I just need to borrow a little money." "No, I'm sorry. Don't you have a pension coming?" Larry was supposed to have recently retired, so I thought it was a lie that he didn't have any money. "I won't receive any of that." "Don't lie to me. You got your pension, didn't you?" It was discovered at the last minute that I had an affair, and I was fired. Incredibly, Larry had been let go just before his retirement. It seems the affair was with a co-worker, and after breaking up with Larry, she became frightened by his stalker-like behavior and reported it to the company. Ultimately, the affair was discovered by the company, and he was fired without his pension. His stalking and the incident with the police were also discovered, which probably contributed to the problem. I felt no sympathy whatsoever after hearing this story. After that, I asked the facility staff to contact the police the next time he called. Giving up on trying to reach me by phone, Larry then started sending letters. They started with, "I want to see you again, and I'm lonely." But by the end they changed to, "I need to borrow money." I think he's in dire straits. I couldn't help but laugh once. I forget which letter it was, but the ink was blurred on one. It looked like it was from tears, but I'm sure it was just water. I'm amazed at such theatrics, wondering what the point is. It really is a hard-knock life. After a year of no replies from me, the letters finally stopped. Then several years passed. I had completely forgotten about Larry. One day while I was out shopping, a dirty, smelly man approached me. He was thin, with an unkempt beard almost entirely gray. It was undoubtedly Larry. "Susan, isn't it?" I was shocked by how different he looked. "I finally found you. Let's start over. You're all I have." As he said this and grabbed my shoulder, I felt fear. "It's me, Larry. You know that, right? I know who you are. But I'm a stranger to you now. Goodbye." As I tried to leave, Larry stepped in front of me, blocking my way. He looked at me with begging eyes. "Please come back home. I can't stand being alone in my old age. You were the one who threw me out, remember? That's why I'm apologizing. An apology won't fix what you did. Plus, I've moved on. You should too." I tried to ignore Larry and leave, but he kept chasing after me, bowing his head again and again. "We're divorced, Larry. Get over it. I was wrong. You were the most important thing to me." I finally realized that. It's too late for that now. As I tried to put distance between us, Larry grabbed my arm. That's when someone said, "Could you let go of her arm, please?" "Who are you?" "This is my husband." "What?" "You see, I remarried. His name is Mark. He's 2 years older than me. We got close at the same care facility. When Larry came to the facility, it was Mark who called security for me. I heard about it from the other residents. I was drawn to his thoughtfulness and kindness. Mark also enjoyed my company, and naturally we started spending more time together. And so, we decided to get married. I did wonder if remarrying at this age was wise, but then I thought, why not be happy in the end? So we went for it. Mark is the one who freed me from Larry. "You mean you got remarried?" "That's right." "So please stop concerning yourself with me." "Oh no." Larry was clearly shaken. I was anxious he might do something to Mark out of anger, but Larry just didn't have it in him anymore. Instead, he just collapsed there and cried. "Come on, stop it, it's embarrassing. Shut up, leave me alone." Larry was crying unabashedly. Everyone was watching from a distance. I thought he looked utterly pitiful, a grown man crying in the street. Can someone really do this so easily, or am I being tested? "Let's go, Susan." "All right." Urged by Mark, I left the scene. Since then, Larry hasn't shown his face to me. According to my son, Larry still lives in that rundown house without making any repairs. He can't manage household chores, doesn't take out the trash, and has been reported several times for the stench. My son gets the calls and it bothers him. No matter what is said, it's no good, and my son finally lost his temper. In front of the social worker, Larry claimed that he wasn't his son. After that, Larry would get angry if my son tried to contact him, so the calls stopped. It seems like the authorities have given up as well, saying it's useless. He's truly a neighborhood nuisance. But it's no longer my concern. In the end, Larry has been abandoned by everyone and is living in isolation. I should have never taken a mistress, he said once, as my son told me. But for me, it's not about the mistress. It's the culmination of a life lived selfishly, without a thought for others. He's reaping what he sowed. Humans might be creatures that regret their actions, but to continue without reflection for over 70 years is just painful. And Larry will likely never realize this. He has destroyed his own future. It's his job to repair it. He might not have the strength to do it himself, but he has to try. I hope Larry faces what he's done and lives the rest of his life in a way that's true to himself. In a way that's true to him. I'm grateful to Larry now. If I had kept expecting something from him, my life would have been ruined. Thanks to the divorce he initiated because of his affair, I can live my own life. I now keep in touch with my son more often. It all changed when my daughter-in-law told me not to worry about it. That's when I realized I had lived a life too considerate of others. I kept my distance from my adult son, thinking I'd bother him. When my son told me he hated his grandmother and father since he was a child, I was shocked. He knew all along about my mother's mistreatment and his father's affairs. I've decided to live the rest of my life without such concerns. Now my son, his wife, and grandchildren come to visit. I plan to catch up on the conversations I couldn't have with my son before. My son seems a bit shy, but it's funny how he can talk naturally when the grandkids and daughter-in-law are around. Mark has been accepted by my son, and my grandkids adore him as if he were their real grandfather. We're enjoying our time together at the facility now. We have many friends there and are happy. We want to stay healthy and live long lives. Ever since my mother passed, whenever I'm alone at home, my mother-in-law and Mary make it a habit to drop by unannounced. They say, "We're here visiting you, and you can't even offer a little hospitality. We'll just have to order steak delivery again, and you're gonna pay for it." Mary giggles at her side. It's been 2 years of this hellish routine. Now, both my son and daughter have left home to attend college in the city. However, on a day when it was just my husband and me, Daniel said something unbelievable. He told me my folks and my sister's family are moving in next week, so clear out your rooms. And then he said, "You're in the way and need to get out." This house, which was originally my family home and now being told to leave it, that's something I cannot forgive. Faced with this, I didn't hesitate to decide on a course of action. I said, "Fine, I'll just clear the house out entirely." Daniel smirked maliciously, thinking he'd won. Little did he know what was coming. He went off on a business trip, and I immediately called to begin the process I had planned. I got everything arranged before Daniel came back, and then I left the house. I can just imagine the look on Daniel's face when he returns. My name is Sofia Garcia. I'm a 48-year-old housewife, living in my childhood home since getting married. After graduating from high school, I went to college and found a job in New York, where I spent all of my single years. However, during a trip back home to Nebraska, I ended up attending a local matchmaking party. I had no intention of moving back to Nebraska, but I was coerced into going by the people around me. I am the type who can't say no when asked. So I went, and the local men, who are not often blessed with such opportunities, were quite eager, to put it mildly. It was like everyone was looking around with greedy eyes, desperately grabbing at any opportunity they could find. Overwhelmed by the atmosphere, I decided to just bide my time until it was appropriate to leave. Next to me, there was a man sitting quietly by himself. That man was Daniel Garcia, the man who would become my husband. Since I was bored being on my own, I shared some food with him. Then, as a thank you, he brought me some food. Daniel was a man of few words, but seemed diligent and sincere, and I found myself drawn to him. After all, if I went back to New York, I had no boyfriend and no significant position at my company. Furthermore, by that time, my father had passed away, and since I had no siblings, my mother was living alone. I was tired of city life and began to feel that marrying and settling down in my hometown wouldn't be so bad. So I married Daniel, and we began living in my family home. Daniel was open to living with my mother because his sister, Mary, and her husband were already living with his parents. Daniel and I were blessed with 2 children, a son and a daughter, and we should have been living a happy married life. But after my mother passed and the children became independent and left the house, I faced an unbelievable misfortune. Daniel, always a quiet man, spoke very little at home after we got married. He didn't involve himself more than necessary in parenting. Perhaps you could say Daniel was a calm type of husband, a gentleman if spoken well of. Having been an only child, I was always close to my mother, consulting her on everything. So, I believe I've been able to raise my kids ideally with the help of my mother. This perfect life changed abruptly, right after my mother passed away. My mother had always found joy in taking care of the family, and after the kids went off to college in the city and left the house, she quickly lost her spirits. And then before long she departed to heaven. I had thought that now, with just Daniel and me, we'd spend our days peacefully as a couple. But after my mother died, Daniel's personality changed completely, as if he flipped over his hand. The man who was once so gentle suddenly started calling me you in a rude tone and became overbearing. "Hey you, if you're not busy, at least make some coffee," he would say while sprawled out in the living room daily, bossing me around. He had never even laid down outside our bedroom before. What on earth happened? Maybe he had been tiptoeing around my mother, his mother-in-law, all this time, but now he's become arrogant and condescending in ways I've never seen before, even towards me as his wife. Maybe he feels it's time to let his hair down now that he doesn't have to tiptoe around my mother. But this sudden change has taken me by surprise. Even our children, who come home occasionally, were stunned by Daniel's transformation. What's worse, when they do come back, Daniel just stays glued to the TV and won't move from the living room. And if the children even try to change the channel, he snaps, "Ah, you're in the way. Go somewhere else." This has made them quite unhappy. It seems they're uncomfortable being around their father Daniel, who is now so boldly asserting his presence in a home where they were originally nurtured by me and my mother. Consequently, our children, who used to come back for every long weekend, now only return for certain holidays. No matter that the in-laws are gone, this attitude is too much. I couldn't take it anymore and decided to casually remark to Daniel, "Hey dear, you seem different lately. What's up with that?" "Different? What do you mean? Maybe since my mother passed? You used to be so gentle, but now you seem quick to anger." When I said that, Daniel's eyes narrowed and he answered with a voice that had an edge to it. "What are you talking about? I've been tiptoeing around your mother all this time. But now that she's gone, I'm the one who calls the shots in this house. If there's something I don't like, it's only natural that I get angry." I had never seen Daniel so intimidating before, and I recoiled in fear. It seems that all the care he took around my mother had been a source of stress for him. However, I never in my wildest dreams thought that Daniel would change so drastically. Ever since, I've had to tread carefully around Daniel, as if to handle him with kid gloves. The misfortunes that have befallen me since my mother passed away don't stop there. I work part-time until 3 p.m. and then return home to do the housework, which has become my daily routine. When my mother was alive, we would enjoy our tea time together at this hour. Now it's become a completely dreary time. When I get home, my mother-in-law and Mary are waiting at the entrance. "Oh, Sophia, you're quite late." "We've been waiting out here in the cold for 40 minutes. That's right. We heard you finish work at 3 p.m., so we came to match that time." "Why are you so late?" "Yeah, Sophia. We heard you get off work at 3 p.m., so we timed our visit to match that." "Why are you so late?" Indeed, these two have learned that my part-time job ends at 3 p.m., and they've taken to showing up at our house at this time every day. In their home, my in-laws live with Mary and her husband. Mary has taken her husband's surname Williams, and like us, she has had her husband move into her parental home. They don't have children, and Mary, who hasn't worked for a long time, is always clinging to my mother-in-law. I used to think my mother-in-law and Mary were kind people when my mother was alive. But just like Daniel, these two started to speak very frankly to me as soon as my mother passed away. Sorry about that. I was doing some shopping on the way back. Thinking of the complaints I would hear later if I showed any displeasure to these two, I can only obey meekly. And so I always end up letting them into the house. Once inside, I need to change my clothes and put away the groceries I've bought. But before I can even do that, my mother-in-law starts to nag. We've come all this way to visit, and you don't even offer us a drink? We have no choice but to order steak delivery again, so you'll pay for it. Mary laughs alongside her. Even though it's nearly 4 p.m., they decide to order delivery food from a restaurant at such a late hour. And as always, I'm the one who ends up paying. I've been living these hellish days for 2 years now. Of course, I've talked to Daniel about it, but he never takes my side. Mom and Mary think you're lonely after losing your mother. They're just trying to be thoughtful. Complaining would be ungrateful. But every time they come, we only eat expensive steaks, and I'm always the one paying. It's making us run a deficit every month. You should just manage our finances better. If it's not enough, find a part-time job that pays more. Besides, you took great care of your own parents, but seemed cold to my family, don't you think? When he puts it that way, I'm left speechless. I don't want to quit my current part-time job because the people there are nice. Despite living at my parents' home, I have never neglected my in-laws' home. I've always made an appearance when Daniel's relatives gathered, and I brought Christmas gifts and birthday presents to his parents' house on some occasions. They used to be kind to me whenever I showed up, Mary and my mother-in-law alike. Why did their attitudes change so abruptly after my mother passed away? I don't know what to do, and the stress has been gradually mounting. Amid these troubling days, an even more astonishing situation arose. One evening, Daniel came home from work and announced something unbelievable. My parents and sister's family are moving in next week, so get your room cleaned out. What? What's happening all of a sudden? I panicked at this abrupt news. What do you mean, what's happening? It's just like I said. Everyone's moving in this Saturday, so hurry up. That meant I had only 3 days left. Daniel had decided this major change without consulting me, just arranging it with his own family. Hey, you can't just decide this on your own. This house originally belonged to my family, and, quiet. Doesn't matter who it originally belonged to. I'm the head of this house now, and I make the decisions. No complaining. I was so shocked by his horrible attitude that I dropped the dish I was washing, and it shattered on the floor. Then, with a sharp crack, the plate I was holding split into 2 pieces. You're so clumsy. That's why I've become sick of being around you. What do you mean by that? I was caught in Daniel's words, wanting to know what he meant. Then Daniel replied with a sneer and a sarcastic tone. Since it's a good opportunity, let me be clear. Mom and Mary like this house and want to live here, but it seems they don't like you. I don't like being with you either, so since you're in the way, you need to get out. Yeah, but yeah, of course, just like I said earlier, pack up all your stuff. I'll be away on a business trip for the next 3 days, so get it done by then. Daniel had been so cruel to me. Angry at his reasoning, I decided without hesitation to take a certain action. Then I'll clear out the entire house. When I said that, Daniel smirked maliciously. I thought you'd put up more of a fight, but you're surprisingly submissive. He seemed very pleased, thinking everything was going his way, unaware that he would regret how he treated me in 3 days. The following day, oblivious Daniel left for his business trip. I immediately made a call to carry out the arrangements I had planned. And before Daniel returned, I had everything in order and left the house. I can already picture the look of surprise on Daniel's face when he comes back. The place I was headed was the apartment of my daughter, Lucy, who lives alone in New York. 3 nights ago, I had already gotten in touch with Lucy in advance. I've been waiting for you, Mom. Is everything taken care of? Yes, all set. But sorry for suddenly imposing on you like this. It's fine. But still, Dad's terrible, isn't he? To suddenly try to kick you out. Yes, but don't worry, I made sure to set things straight before I came here. Dad's going to be quite surprised later. I said that and burst into laughter with Lucy. There was a reason I had come to Lucy's place. Late into the night, as expected, Daniel called in a panic. "You? What the hell is this? The house is empty. Where are all the furniture and appliances?" "Oh, but wasn't that what you said? To pack up all your things?" "I said to pack up everything in your room." "Your room, not everything in the house." Indeed, Daniel had initially said, "Pack up your room." But after telling me to leave, he said, "Pack up all your stuff." You wanted me to leave, right? So I got rid of all my furniture and appliances that I inherited from my mother. Now your family can move in without any worries, right? Yes. The actions I had taken over these 3 days started with having all the furniture and appliances I used picked up by a recycling company. Then I contacted movers to transport the belongings that belonged to the kids and the things I would still use to Lucy's apartment. I felt bad for the inconvenience to Lucy, but she was eager to get back at Daniel and agreed to help. After a while, Daniel, sounding a bit troubled, started to speak. Actually, the whole thing about my parents' and sister's family moving in was a lie. Mom and Mary, they both might be getting divorced. Oh, really? So they're planning to run away to your place, huh? I retorted as if I had known all along. What? You're not surprised? They both might be getting divorced, you know? Well, I knew that already. Huh? Daniel sounded baffled. I had made sure to contact my father-in-law and Mary's husband Anthony over these 3 days. So I was fully aware of the whole situation with the in-laws. Actually, Anthony is from New York, and he had been interested in a local revitalization matchmaking event held in our area, so he participated on a whim. There, he was liked by Mary, who approached him aggressively, and even her mother persuaded him persistently until he agreed to marry her. Then, at the request of Mary and my mother-in-law, he ended up moving into the in-laws' house. After getting married, the mother-in-law, who was biased towards Mary, let her do whatever she wanted, and it seems Anthony had a hard time because of their capricious behavior. Moreover, Mary stopped cooking once she started coming to my place in the evenings. Well, it makes sense since they ate so many steaks every evening, so of course they didn't cook. This had been going on for 2 years, so my father-in-law got furious and told Mary and his wife to get out. I felt relieved when Anthony told me about it, and then Daniel, hearing that his mother and Mary were about to be kicked out, decided to let them move into our house. They would be bringing just the bare minimum of their belongings, so they would be in trouble without furniture or appliances. By the way, when Daniel said he was going on a business trip, he was actually going to plead with his father to forgive the 2 women. But since his father wouldn't agree, he had no choice but to help them pack up their things. When I told Daniel everything I heard from Anthony, I could faintly hear someone say, "Well, what a calculating wife." From his end, it seemed his mother was eavesdropping. "Sophia, what are you going to do about this? We can't live like this with nothing here." "Yeah, and to think you even talked to my husband behind my back. How terrible of you." There was Mary as well. "Oh, you all seem to be in quite a bind. By the way, I also asked Anthony if he could forgive you too. He said if you spend a night to cool off and reflect, you can come back home tomorrow morning." Really? Mary and her mother, perhaps delighted, were making a racket with excitement. "Sophia, I take back what I said earlier. Turns out, you do have your good points, don't you?" Daniel said, sounding disappointed, even though he had brought the 2 women home. "Well, it's good for the 2 of them, but what about me? Can't you at least bring back the appliances? Oh, by the way, while I was at it, I arranged to sell the house, so please move out soon, okay? Hey!" Daniel's voice rose, almost as if he couldn't believe what I said. "Husband, how could you do this to me?" "Oh, but weren't you the one trying to kick me out? That in itself is quite harsh treatment." Daniel fell silent with nothing to say in return. I pressed further. "Oh, and by the way, your stuff is all still in the house, isn't it? That small desk you use as a study. Check the drawer. I've sorted out the necessary application, so just submit it properly. Okay?" I could hear Daniel's footsteps as he hurried to the back room where the desk was. Opening the drawer, he muttered, This is a divorce form?" "Yes, that's right. Once you file, I'll proceed with it through a third party." "Don't joke with me. Why should we have to get a divorce?" Oh, you wanted me out, didn't you? That's the same as a divorce, isn't it? Daniel probably never imagined that the seeds he sowed would be reaped in such a way. I thought he had gone silent, but then I heard him sobbing. Then, in a voice laced with sobs, he began to plead desperately. Please, I'm begging you. I was wrong. I'll take care of you from now on. Can you please reconsider? I'm begging you, believe me. Daniel was saying this, but I couldn't forgive his misdeeds of caring only for his family and trying to drive me out. It was fine for him to take in his mother-in-law and marry, but he should have consulted me first. How could I trust a husband who, after neglecting me, decided to take in his mother and sister and kick out his wife? So, no matter how much he apologized now, my decision wouldn't change. And the next morning, this time I received a phone call from Mary. You liar, Sophia! When I got home, Dad and Anthony were gone, and on top of that, the house was already sold. Mary sounded very angry, but I remained calm and unfazed. I didn't lie at all. I did say you could come back. But I never said that your father-in-law or brother-in-law would be waiting at home for you. Over the phone, Mary and her mother were saying to each other, "Damn it! We've been deceived." Then, noticing an unmarked envelope in the mailbox, my mother-in-law opened it and let out a loud "oh." Inside was a letter from my father-in-law addressed to his wife and Mary. And the content of the letter was that both of their husbands wanted a divorce. I had already been informed about the contents of that letter by my father-in-law. My father-in-law had long run out of patience with my mother-in-law, who lacked honesty and was always selfish. So it seems he had been considering moving into a senior living facility by himself for quite some time. This incident had made him resolve to go through with it, and he said he was going to sell the house. Anthony, too, seems to be planning to divorce Mary, who has been spoiled rotten by her mother, and return to his parents' home in New York. Sophia, you have to do something. We'll have nowhere to live if things stay like this. I suggested, but it seemed Mary was too proud to admit her fault. She stayed silent and began to sob. Next to her, her mother was comforting her, saying, "Poor thing." And then, grabbing the phone from Mary, she shouted as loudly as she could, "You wicked wife!" Inhuman. I was startled by the scream, but it seemed like nothing more than sour grapes. I maintained my composure and delivered my final words. "All right, I understand. Take care and best wishes. Goodbye." I heard a "wait a minute" from the other end, but I hung up without concern. I was done being bothered by the likes of them. After all, it was their own selfish behavior that brought about this misfortune, and they treated me as the villain to the very end. Soon I will be divorcing Daniel, making these two practically strangers. Once that happens, I likely won't have to deal with them ever again. Daniel didn't submit the divorce papers for a while after that, so I hired a lawyer and filed for divorce. As a result of the court proceedings, I was finally able to get a formal divorce from Daniel. Daniel demanded half the proceeds from the sale of the house as part of the property division, but the judge ruled it was not marital property and his claim was denied. How can that be? I have nowhere to live. How am I supposed to survive from here on out? Daniel, enraged by the outcome of the trial, started to yell at me, but he was stopped by the judge. Daniel was completely deflated, but I couldn't find any room for sympathy. It would have been nice if at least Daniel had felt a bit sorry for the daily intrusions by his mother and Mary. My marriage with Daniel ended in the worst state possible. After that, Daniel, now also divorced like his mother and Mary, seemed to be looking for a new home. In the countryside, with nothing around, there were no convenient budget hotels or inns. According to a local friend, they were seen setting up cardboard to sleep in the park. At first, Daniel called me asking for help, but recently, even those messages have stopped. Perhaps his phone service has been disconnected. Eventually, I heard rumors that they managed to move into a nearly derelict apartment on the outskirts of town. Daniel's earnings must be barely enough to get by, especially supporting a mother and Mary who have never worked. Mary, who is of an age where she could still be working actively, appears to remain unemployed. Due to her pride, she refuses to work under someone else, no matter how tough life gets. Lately, the loud arguments between the mother and Mary can be heard outside, becoming a nuisance to the neighbors. The mother-in-law, whom I once thought was favoring her kin, turned out to be only looking out for herself. Now, in this situation, the non-working Mary seems to be nothing but a burden. Daniel, probably not enjoying living with these two, has recently been addicted to casinos. The earnings that Daniel works so hard for seem to be flying away on the bets at casinos. Friends living back home kept me updated via social media messaging and calls about the situation of these three. To me, it's a story that no longer matters, but when I hear it, I find myself thinking they got what they deserved. Now I'm living in New York. Just before the divorce was finalized, I had been discussing my plans for the future with Anthony, who had already divorced Mary and returned to New York. It turned out that Anthony's brother ran a food company and offered me a job there. For a while I stayed with Lucy, but Anthony helped me look for my own place. Thanks to him, I now live alone in a small apartment. I've been completely indebted to Anthony for everything, and I can't thank him enough. Anthony, who has gone through tough times similar to mine, and I find a lot in common to talk about. We both found our spouses at a matchmaking event aimed at revitalizing the region, and both marriages ended in failure. That matchmaking event hasn't been held for decades now. Despite everything, I still care about my hometown. Seeing fewer people getting married in that area made me worry a bit about the potential consequences. Depopulation is a growing concern. However, it appears that matchmaking events have become obsolete due to the widespread use of dating apps by young people. In my hometown, where opportunities to meet are scarce, many couples now meet and marry through these apps. Additionally, I have heard from friends that there has been an increase in remote workers moving to the countryside in search of affordable housing. As a result, the number of young people in my hometown is on the rise. Even though I am currently living away from my hometown, it is heartening to know that it is becoming more vibrant. I too am considering returning to my hometown for a leisurely retirement in the countryside. Recently, I have started dating Anthony with the intention of getting remarried. Only $4,000 for this month's allowance? What is this about? I specifically told you to make it $6,000. I am sorry, but your son Robert has passed away, so there will no longer be any allowances. What? What are you talking about? There's only $4,000 here. I know it may be hard to believe, but it is true. My husband Robert took his own life. No way. Is that really true? When did it happen? It was about a week after you last spoke with him on the phone. Why didn't you say anything? Robert had requested in his will to not have a funeral and to keep his passing a secret for a while. Upon hearing this, my mother-in-law, who had been upset about not receiving the $6,000 allowance, fell silent. It is only natural to be at a loss for words upon hearing of your son's passing. In the silence that followed, I thought this was the case, but it turns out it was not. What a shame. I raised him with so much effort and money, thinking it was an investment. I was expecting to receive more money. Are you serious? Robert has passed away, and those are the words you come up with? If he is gone, there's no need to sugarcoat things, right? Oh, and since I will no longer be receiving Robert's $4,000 allowance, let us not forget that we had an agreement for a $2,000 allowance. Keep that up? Are you kidding me? I found myself yelling at the unbelievable words of my mother-in-law and hung up the phone. This was her true nature. Although it left a bad taste in my mouth, this likely resolved the issue of the high allowance for my mother-in-law. About this phone call, actually, my name is Emily. I am 28 years old, a company employee, and about to get married. My fiancé John is 32 years old and works as a mechanic, repairing and maintaining factory machinery. We have chosen not to live together before marriage, so we're still living separately. However, I have a key to his apartment, so I can come and go as I please. Therefore, I often visit his place. Welcome back. Oh, you smell again today. Dinner's ready, but why don't you take a bath first? I was going to take a bath first without you saying. To avoid dirtying the interior, my husband took off his socks at the entrance and lifted the hems of his pants so they wouldn't touch the floor as he headed to the bathroom. John always comes home smelling of sweat and oil. It's not a pleasant smell, but it's proof of his hard work, so it's not something to dislike. I'm a serious person, and I like my hardworking fiancé. Once we're done greeting your mother, let's start looking for a house to live in together. I've told you before, it's okay. After John comes out of the bath, it's dinner time. Lately, I always talk about house hunting during dinner. I can't wait to start living together. John always replies to my confirmation with a bored look, but his mouth relaxes as he eats. He must be looking forward to living together too. Once we live together, we'll say goodbye to this cheap studio apartment he's been frequenting. It's small and inconvenient, but leaving it feels a bit sad. I look around the room like a graduate looking back at the classroom they once occupied. Even though John is over 30, he's continued to live in this cheap small studio, but it's not because he earns little. I once asked him why. Hey, aren't you gonna move to a bigger place? Isn't it cramped and inconvenient here? Well, it's close to work and the rent is cheap. We can manage with the small space. Ah, I see, apart from the size, it's convenient then. Gotta save money, you know? Robert is a saver, not just on rent, but he also cuts corners on groceries, utility bills, and buys only the bare minimum of clothes. It's a bit stingy, but certainly better than being a spendthrift. I think a practical guy like him is good to marry. He's serious about work, sensible with money, and kind to me. So I had no worries about marrying Robert. But after meeting his mother, my anxiety about marriage suddenly grew. On the day we went to greet Robert's mother, I was nervous. Will it be okay? What if she doesn't like me? Aren't you worrying too much? It'll be fine. As we arrived at Robert's family home, my breathing became erratic. To calm down, I took a deep breath and sipped some water. There's a reason I was so nervous. Robert's mom divorced right after his birth. And after the divorce, his father disappeared, stopping child support payments. So his mom raised Robert all by herself. The typical mother-in-law issue of feeling like her carefully raised son is being taken away. Taken away, it seemed inevitable. Since she is a single parent, I really wanted to avoid any conflicts. To start a peaceful married life, it is crucial to make a good impression on her. After putting my water bottle back in my bag, I braced myself and entered Robert's family home. So you're Robert's fiancé? I don't like you. Looks like a peaceful start to married life is off the table. We had just exchanged simple greetings at the entrance and were seated in the living room. It wasn't that I did something wrong, she just hadn't taken a liking to me from the start. Mom, why would you say something like that right off the bat? We're gonna be family, no need for formalities, right? Plus, it's better to be upfront about these things. Mom, no matter what you say, I'm gonna marry her. I'm not opposing the marriage, okay? I'm just expressing my feelings. Don't worry. A quiet parental argument unfolded before me. Feeling awkward, I fidgeted with my toes while sitting formally, hoping time would pass quickly. What don't you like about Emily? She's just a mid-level company employee, not earning much, right? I came to greet her for marriage, but the conversation was just between Robert and his mom. Butting in might worsen her impression of me, so I left it to Robert. Still, being called low income irked me a bit. Sure, my salary isn't that high, but it's not low either. And I don't struggle with living expenses. Maybe she's just worried her son might struggle if he marries someone who might not contribute much financially. Emily, despite what I said, my son is precious to me. Please take good care of him. Yes, I understand. Finally, the hellish time that felt like 1 minute stretched to 10 was over. Though Robert's mother said she didn't like me, she wasn't opposed to our marriage and ended up saying she wished us well. She must be just concerned about her son. Thinking positively, I decided to work on deepening our relationship with her and stood up, my legs a bit numb. Just a second, Robert. As we were about to leave through the front door, Robert's mother called him back. I stopped too since she had stopped Robert. It's okay, Emily. Wait outside. I felt a bit left out and sad being treated like an outsider, but I figured there might be things for parents and children to discuss alone, so I quietly stepped out and closed the door. While waiting outside, I could hear fragments of Robert's conversation with his mother through the door. Allowance? I understand. It was hard to make out the full conversation, but I heard allowance. I hadn't known before. But it seemed Robert had been sending his mother money. But why did they need to send me away for a conversation about allowance? Did they think I would oppose it? Sorry for making you wait. No, it's fine. Though I was curious about the allowance discussion, it wasn't shared with me, so I couldn't ask Robert. I hadn't felt any anxiety about marrying him until this greeting with his mother, but now I started to feel some. Months later, Robert and I got married and started our married life. The anxiety I felt during that marriage greeting was completely blown away by our marital bliss. So much so I had forgotten about the allowance conversation. But soon after we started living together, I was reminded of it. This is how much I have saved up. What about you, Robert? Well, Robert nervously placed his bank book on the table, like a child caught doing something wrong. How couples handle their savings from before marriage varies. We decided to treat our pre-marriage savings as joint funds, so we were showing each other our bank books. But I was shocked when I saw Robert's. There's hardly anything here. Why? You were so frugal. Well, I've been sending money to my mom. Hearing about the allowance, I suddenly remembered the conversation between Robert and his mother during the marriage greeting. The allowance and an almost empty bank book stirred a feeling of unrest in my chest. Now that I knew he was giving money to his mother, it was something that involved our joint finances. So I felt no hesitation in asking, "The allowance is for your mom, right? How much are you sending?" $4,000 a month. $4,000. I was stunned by the amount, much higher than I expected. I never thought such a big issue would come up so soon after our marriage. Robert had started sending $600 a month when he first started working, but his mother gradually demanded more, and now it's $4,000 a month. Initially, his mother said she didn't need any allowance. But even then, Robert continued to send her money. Maybe she got used to living comfortably with the allowance. Despite being only 57 and still young, she quit her job and now only works part-time, relying entirely on Robert's allowance for her living expenses. After subtracting $4,000 from Robert's salary, we're left with just enough to cover the bare essentials. Now, I finally understood why he lived in a cheap apartment and bought so little. Why do you keep up with such an unreasonable allowance? If it's tough, you could just say no or reduce it to a more manageable amount, right? No. Well, my mom struggled to raise me until I graduated college, and I think money was tight, so when she asks, it's hard for me to say no. As I gently placed Robert's bank book back on the table, he stared blankly at it and fell silent. It seems he couldn't refuse his mother's demands because of his gratitude for being raised and his overly kind nature. I think Robert is also responsible for not refusing his mother's requests. But hearing his story, it seems like his mother understands his sense of obligation and takes advantage of his kind nature. I spoke to Robert, who looked dejected like a scolded child, in as gentle a tone as possible. I think it's good to take care of your mother, but the current relationship isn't healthy. Yeah, you're right, it isn't healthy. Robert picked up his bank book, flipping through it with a sigh. It seemed he understood that his relationship with his mom couldn't continue this way. But given his personality and the future relationship with his mother, suddenly stopping the allowance or reducing it back to the initial $600 seemed difficult. Could you gradually reduce the allowance amount? Yeah, I'll talk to my mom about it next time I call her. Robert left the living room to put away his bank book, looking somewhat diminished. 3 days after the high allowance was revealed, Robert still hadn't contacted his mother. I wanted him to call her soon, but I understood that asking his mother to reduce the allowance must require a lot of courage for him. So I couldn't rush him. However, before long, his mother took the initiative. "Hello, Emily. I have a small favor to ask. I'm about to go back to work after my break. It's okay, this will be quick. Actually, I've been getting an allowance from my son. I heard from Robert the other day. His mother had called to tell me she was receiving an allowance from him. She probably figured that sooner or later, I'd find out she was getting $4,000 a month. So she decided to confess first to mitigate my anger and try to keep the amount from being reduced. Her timing during my lunch break also seemed calculated. Being short on time might prevent me from making a calm decision. I began to understand why Robert couldn't stand up to his mother. She was more cunning than I had thought and bolder than I had imagined. "So, you know about the allowance? That makes it easier. Since Robert is married and you're working, the household income has increased, right? So I was thinking, maybe you could increase the allowance amount? Robert is already giving me $4,000, so how about another $2,000 from your salary? What? I blurted out loud, attracting glances from my coworkers. Embarrassed, I apologized to them while still on the phone with his mother. That's impossible, you know? Is it? Then maybe I should ask Robert for another $2,000? Wait, what are you thinking? Once more, I raised my voice, apologizing to my coworkers. That's why she was concerned about my income at the marriage meeting. But if you won't pay, I guess I'll have to ask Robert. All right, I'll handle it. But not this month. Please start from next month. Thank you, that helps. I hung up the phone, feeling a deep sense of defeat. I had given in to her demands, cornered by a phone call during my work break and her using Robert as leverage. That night, I told Robert about the call and her demand for an increased allowance. What? Mom called Emily? And she asked you for an allowance too? I apologized to Robert, feeling a bit relieved. He usually becomes meek when it comes to his mother, but he showed anger when he heard she had demanded an allowance from me. This was a good sign, as it might mean he would stand up to her. However, that positive turn was short-lived. The company was going to go bankrupt. The next evening, as Robert returned from work, he staggered towards me like a zombie and reported in a lifeless voice that made me question my ears. I was left speechless, my hands frozen in the middle of preparing dinner. We were newlyweds, and with the issues with his mother, what terrible timing. I thought, why now? But in these times, a company going bankrupt is not unheard of. Robert, who had worked diligently, wasn't to blame. I decided to redirect my disappointment towards the country's inability to escape recession and stimulate economic growth. This changes things. The next day, I called my mother-in-law about increasing the allowance to $6,000 from next month. Could you wait a little? I asked, why? What happened? She replied, well, Robert's company is going bankrupt. Considering the future, I'd like to wait a bit before increasing the allowance. Eh? But, Emily, you promised to increase it to $6,000 from next month, right? The situation has changed, so please, I pleaded. I feel sorry for my son, but you made a promise. Even if he loses his job, you have some savings, right? Plus, Robert will get severance pay, unemployment benefits, and layoff notice allowances, right? But still, I tried to resist, but she wouldn't accept my request. I thought about telling Robert, but he was in a daze from the shock of unemployment. I couldn't bring up the allowance. Pondering what to do, I watched Robert's listless face staring at the TV. Why does she still demand an allowance when her son is unemployed? As I watched Robert, feeling weaker by the moment, anger slowly began to rise within me. Thinking back to the phone conversation with my mother-in-law. A month after Robert's unemployment, it was time for the $6,000 allowance, but I transferred only $4,000. Of course, my money-hungry mother-in-law called that night. I checked the bank account. Why is the allowance only $4,000 this month? Didn't you say it would be $6,000? She must have been looking forward to the $2,000 increase. Her anger was palpable, but there was a reason I could only send $4,000. I had to tell her the truth. Robert has passed away, so there will be no more allowances. What? What are you saying? There's $4,000 here? I know it's hard to believe, but it's true. Robert became mentally ill after the company's bankruptcy and took his own life. The $4,000 this time was due to the bank's automatic transfer service he used, which I couldn't cancel in time. No way. Is it true? When? About a week after our last phone call. Why didn't you tell me? Robert wrote in his will not to have a funeral and to keep it secret for a while. We had a direct burial. He must have felt ashamed to end his life after 30. He wrote in his will to tell others it was a subarachnoid hemorrhage. But I wanted to tell you the truth. She fell silent. All I could hear was the faint sound of the TV from her house. Losing her son must have left her speechless. She might also regret making Robert send her high allowances. During the silent moment, I thought that, but it seems I was mistaken. By the way, wasn't Robert insured? Since there was no funeral, there should be some money left, right? Isn't that money for me? What? I invested time and money in raising him, hoping to get more back. I thought I'd still be able to get some money. Are you serious? Your son has died, and these are the words you come up with? If he's gone, there's no need to be careful with words, right? Oh, and since I won't get Robert's $4,000 anymore, we had agreed on $2,000 from you, so keep that up. Don't be ridiculous. I found myself yelling at the unbelievable words of my mother-in-law and hung up the phone. This was her true nature. It left a bitter taste in my mouth, but this should resolve the allowance issue with her. A week after the unpleasant call with my mother-in-law, the doorbell rang early in the morning. Hurry up and open the door. When I answered the intercom, her face filled the screen, yelling at me. But I responded calmly without any surprise. I'm coming, please don't yell, I said. I stopped the toaster I was using to make toast and leisurely headed to the front door. Perhaps I was too slow, as my impatient mother-in-law started banging on the door and shouting, "What are you doing?" "Open up." I opened the door with a feeling of annoyance, and there she stood, looking furious. You lied," she exclaimed. "I heard that Robert is working as usual." "About Robert?" I asked. Yes, the part about him passing away was a lie. My mother-in-law was taken aback by my blunt admission of the lie, looking foolishly surprised. I never intended to keep up the lie that Robert had died. It was just to deceive her over the phone. Therefore, Robert has been living his life without hiding. He's found a new job and leaves for work every morning, and he communicates normally with acquaintances and friends. Probably my mother-in-law heard from someone else that Robert was alive. She must feel quite embarrassed for misunderstanding that her own son had died. "Why would you tell such a lie?" she asked. "It was to confirm your true nature," I replied. Robert, having no need to hide, also came to the entrance. "I heard the last phone call, too." "What did you say?" I asked. "I listened to that conversation. About not needing to be considerate anymore, and about the preliminary investment." Hearing her mention of the preliminary investment, Robert glared at her. His expression, one I had never seen before, intimidated my mother-in-law, and her earlier bravado completely vanished. Robert had always been a bit weak when it came to his mother, but now he stood confidently. Just as I had planned. I couldn't bear the idea of my disheartened, unemployed husband being pressured for more allowance by his mother. Initially, I intended to gradually reduce the allowance, but I decided to stop it altogether. Robert had already promised to try reducing the allowance. Considering his character and his relationship with his mother, it must have taken courage. Encouraged by my words, he mustered that courage, and I thought if I pushed a little more, we could stop the allowance altogether. So my plan was to pretend Robert had died, expose my mother-in-law's true nature, and have Robert confirm it. It was a disrespectful plan, I know. But if things continued, it would ruin Robert's life. So I was prepared to be seen as the villain for executing this plan. So I was raised as an investment for money? My mother-in-law asked. "No, that was just a metaphor, an example," I explained. "Really? Then what did you mean by preliminary investment?" she asked. My mother-in-law was desperately trying to find a way out, looking around for any hint. Unfortunately for her, no matter what counter-argument she tried to come up with, she had few cards to play. "So you repay the kindness of being raised by betraying me like this? What a terrible son and daughter-in-law." I glared at her, mentally cheering. The old Robert might have backed down when confronted with his debt of being raised. But now, knowing her true nature, that tactic wouldn't work on him. And I had prepared for this card. Any debt of being raised has long been repaid. Robert attended public schools from elementary to university, right? The cost of raising a child in such cases is about $140,000. Robert has been sending allowances for 10 years. It started at $600, then $1,000, $1,400, $2,000, and now $4,000. The total sum of the allowances so far is $216,000. If his upbringing was an investment, then you've already profited by over $60,000. Isn't that enough? My mother-in-law seemed at a loss for words. All she could do was open and close her mouth like a fish with no sound coming out. This was also information I had researched on the internet to help push Robert's back. Thinking about how his mother had spent effort and money on raising him, my kind-hearted husband couldn't push her away. So I told Robert about the amount of money spent on him and how he had already paid back more than that. Realizing he had already repaid his debt in numbers, it seemed Robert was able to clear his mind of any obligation towards his mother. From next month on, we're not sending any allowance. Wait a minute. That's not fair. How will I live without it? You're still 57, right? You can work plenty, but working at this age after all this time may be difficult. My mother-in-law tried to argue, but seeing Robert's firm stance, she seemed to give up. Her voice faded and eventually fell silent. This was the outcome I had hoped for. It would have been okay for me to refuse the allowance, but if I did, she might still try to get money from Robert behind my back. So it was necessary for Robert himself to refuse it. I have plans with Emily today. If we're done here, can you leave? And please don't contact us again. It's always about money with you anyway. Robert pushed my mother-in-law out of the entrance, closed the door with force, and immediately locked it. It seemed she had realized she couldn't change the situation, as her footsteps receded from the other side of the door. I'm going back to preparing breakfast. I returned to the kitchen and resumed toasting the bread. Robert, as he said, firmly stopped the allowance. My mother-in-law, who had been relying on the allowance for living, had to start job hunting, as part-time work wasn't enough. But with a nearly 10-year gap and nearing 60, it seemed she couldn't find a job. Moreover, it appeared she had spent the allowance she received from Robert every month, leaving her with no savings. Now she's juggling 4 part-time jobs, working from morning till night. Had she shown even a hint of remorse when I said Robert had died, I might have continued the allowance a bit. But she called his upbringing a preliminary investment. She had a chance but failed to seize it, and her tough life now is her own doing. Robert has no intention of caring for her in her old age. Starting to prepare for retirement at 57 with no savings will be tough, so she'll have to work hard. As for us, we're enjoying our newlywed life. Robert has become brighter since the burden of the allowance was lifted. Also, having the courage to stand up to his mother has seemingly made him a bit more rugged. I've grown to love him even more. Eager to see my beloved husband, I'm hurrying home from work today. Wait, what's going on? I was shocked by the sight that greeted me as I entered my room. My cherished accessories and favorite clothes had vanished. Could it be a burglary? Panicking, I reached for my cell phone to call the police. Just as I expected, you're panicking. Jess, just as you expected, you don't mean exactly that. I threw away your belongings, treating them like trash. Seeing me in a state of panic, my mother-in-law laughed heartily and uttered the unbelievable. She had thrown away my belongings as trash? Why would she do such a thing? I was about to ask her, but she started explaining the truth before I could. How long do you plan to leech off this house? Hurry up and leave. I've thrown away various things to make it easier for you to move out. You should be thankful. I see. So the harassment she's been giving me was to drive me out. As for me, I no longer have any intention of getting along with my mother-in-law. If that's how it's going to be, all right, I understand. I'll leave. Good, that makes things easier. Make it quick if you're going. Yes, but if I leave the house so suddenly, I won't have anywhere to stay. Could I have a week's grace? Fine, I can allow that much. Just make sure you leave after a week. My mother-in-law gave me a week's grace. With that much time, I can find a new place. Just you watch, I'll show her. I'll show you, the one who drove me out. My name is May. I switched to being a freelance illustrator 3 years ago, having worked at an animation production company. After graduating from vocational school, I had a decent amount of savings. I'm thinking of going independent, is that so? I won't object if that's what you want, May. Give it your best shot. I'll support you. When I asked my husband Andrew if it was okay to go independent, he responded positively. I had assumed he would object. Surprised, my eyes widened. Andrew and I have been dating since vocational school, and after graduation, we each went our separate ways but continued dating smoothly and got married in our 3rd year of working. This year marks our 8th wedding anniversary. Really? Thank you. Well, I'm a man who gave up on the illustrator path. Well, I'm personally curious to see how far you can go, May. Just don't overdo it, okay? If you're in trouble, you can always rely on me. Yeah, I'll do my best. With that determination, I quit my job and became a freelancer. But it wasn't easy to make a living. For the first few months, there were times when I had no income and felt down. Maybe it was impossible for someone like me to earn a living as an illustrator. I had such thoughts many times, but I didn't give up and continued drawing illustrations and posting them on social media. Then one day, one of my illustrations went viral, and I became a well-known illustrator on social media. Since then, I've grown rapidly, earning up to $20,000 a month through corporate projects and app stickers. It's all thanks to you pushing me forward. Thank you. Nah, it's just your hard work being recognized. That's really something. I truly am grateful to my husband. If he had said no back then, I wouldn't have been able to earn this much. But still, it's not like I've saved up a huge fortune yet. Ideally, I'd love to buy our own home and have a workspace for myself. Right now, we're living in a cheap apartment, just the two of us. It's great that my work has increased, but I'm running out of space to keep my materials. One day, thinking about all this, my husband suggested moving in with his mother. Mom's the only one living at home, and there are spare rooms. How about it? Really? Can we just move in like that? Of course I've talked to Mom about it. Ever since Dad ran off with his mistress when I was a kid, we've had spare rooms. Mom said she doesn't mind at all if May uses them. Such a generous offer, I couldn't find a reason to say no. I immediately told Andrew that we should move in with his mother. Andrew suggested that we move into his mother's house. 2 weeks later, when we arrived at my mother-in-law Jess's house, she warmly welcomed us. It's been a while, May. It has. Please take good care of me from today on. Likewise, I heard from Andrew that you're now a popular artist, right? Oh, not really that much. Feel free to use the room as you like. Come on in. Living with my kind mother-in-law and husband, I had no worries at all. I'm going to work hard on my creative projects in this house. With renewed determination, I started my new life at my in-laws. But at that time, I had no idea about my seemingly kind mother-in-law's true nature. After living with my in-laws for 3 months, I had become quite accustomed to the environment. Alright, that's the work delivered. My work was going smoothly, and I was earning much more now thanks to the upgraded workspace. Things were really going well. I got a bit carried away, but 2 months later, our lives started to go awry when Andrew suddenly got fired from his job. What should we do? Andrew came home sighing deeply. What happened to him? Did something go wrong at work? What's wrong? Did something happen with your sales? After graduating from vocational school, Andrew worked as a salesman at a major trading company for factories. I thought he might have failed in some sales activities, but the response I got was something I never expected. I got fired. What? What did you just say? I mean, I got fired, laid off? That can't be true, right? Andrew was always so diligent at work. Why would this happen? Did you do something wrong to get laid off? Of course not. It's just that our department had been underperforming for a while, and the company saw us as a liability. They told us to either accept a major pay cut and a dead-end job, or take a generous severance package and leave. It's practically forced retirement, you know? I couldn't ask Andrew anything more. There were no words I could offer to my husband, who had been so abruptly betrayed by the company he had dedicated himself to. All I could do was give him some space. From the next day, Andrew began a life of lazing around at home, having lost his job. Honestly, I wished he would snap out of it and start looking for work, but he probably wasn't ready yet. No choice. I'll have to work harder for Andrew and my mother-in-law, who wasn't working. I immersed myself in my work more than ever. Sometimes I worked non-stop from morning till night, skipping meals. I might have overdone it. But even though I sometimes thought that, after about a month, a substantial amount of money was deposited into my account. Seeing an amount I had never seen before, I unintentionally said to Andrew, "You don't have to rush to find a job. I made $100,000 this month. With this much, we can live comfortably as long as we don't splurge." Whoa, that's amazing. Andrew complimented me, but his eyes looked cold. Why did I tell him about my earnings at that time? From the next day, I began to receive relentless harassment from my mother-in-law, Jess, because of this. The following morning, May, come here for a sec. While I was working, I heard Jess calling me loudly from downstairs. That's unusual. What's going on? Okay, just a minute, I replied and paused my work to go downstairs. Jess was standing in the living room. What's up? Can you do the laundry? But I haven't finished my work yet. You can do that anytime, right? I've been quiet till now, but isn't it about time you start taking care of the house properly? You're a wife, aren't you? Well, she has a point. I can understand where Jess is coming from. Until now, I might have been too engrossed in my work and left chores like cleaning and laundry to her. Feeling remorseful, I told her, you're right. Maybe I was wrong. Okay, I'll do the laundry as soon as I finish this current task. Just leave it there, please. Later, as promised, I did the laundry and cleaned the living room. Maybe doing this kind of thing once in a while is a nice break, I thought. It was a light-hearted matter, but from that day, Jess's mistreatment escalated. Always drawing pictures. Are you a kindergartner? If you have time for such silly things, go shopping. I can't believe your drawings sell. And so on. She started to complain about everything I did. I was constantly being overworked, and my projects weren't progressing at all. On bad days, I was woken up before 5 a.m. to prepare breakfast, inevitably reducing my sleep. I couldn't focus on my work, and the amount of work I could do each day decreased significantly. Though my income hadn't dropped drastically yet, I was worried I might eventually become unable to work. Anxious, I decided to ask Andrew to talk to Jess about stopping the harassment. When we were alone in the bedroom, I brought it up. Lately, your mom has been picking on me. It's okay to be bossed around, but being at her mercy from morning till night, I might not be able to work. At this rate, could you maybe gently ask her to stop? What a pain. Why do I have to say it? You should tell her yourself. Besides, if you're worried about not being able to work, why don't we just move out? You're making money, right? What? What kind of response is that? I've been working so hard because you've been lounging around without looking for a job. I agree with Andrew that if I have complaints, I should speak up myself. But how can I say such a thing to my mother-in-law? In the end, Andrew turned his back on me and went to sleep without really listening to me. 6 months later, every day I continued to face relentless mistreatment from Jess and was exhausted both physically and mentally. Andrew still hadn't made any effort to find a job. My work pace had drastically slowed, and my earnings had dropped to less than half of what they used to be. I'm so tired of this. Realizing this, I found myself having left the house and arrived at a nearby park. Sitting on a bench without doing anything felt incredibly soothing. After about an hour, I felt relaxed and returned home. I'm not in the mood to work today. Maybe I'll take a nap. Thinking this, I went back to my room and was shocked by what I saw. I couldn't believe my eyes when I entered my room. All my cherished accessories and favorite clothes were gone. Could it be a burglary? Panicking, I reached for my cell phone to call the police. Then suddenly Jess spoke to me from behind. Jess, just as you expected, you don't mean... That's right. I threw out your personal belongings as trash. Seeing me in a panic, Jess laughed out loud and said something unbelievable. She threw away my belongings as trash? Why would she do that? I was about to ask her, but Jess started explaining before I could. How long do you plan to parasitize this house? Get out already. I threw away various things to make it easier for you to leave. You should be thankful. I see, so the harassment I received was to drive me out. Well, I have no intention of getting along with Jess anymore if that's how it is. Understood. I'll leave. Good, that makes things easier. Make it quick. Yes, but if I leave the house so suddenly, I won't have anywhere to stay. Can I have a week's grace? Fine, that should be okay. But make sure you leave after a week. Jess gave me a week's grace. With that much time, I can find a new place. Just you watch. I'll show you the one who drove me out. The next day, I started looking for a new place. I considered a single-family home, but despite Jess, I decided to move into a luxury high-rise condo. Of course, I won't be taking Andrew and Jess with me. I have no intention of living with a man who just lazes around without looking for work, relying on my earnings. Besides, I have saved up a good amount of money from my past earnings. Using that money, I went to a real estate agent and signed a contract to buy an apartment in the high-rise. Now, I'm ready to leave that house at any time. And a week later, the day I finally left my in-laws' house, I brought up divorce to Andrew. "Can you sign this?" I asked him. "What is this?" He replied. "Can't you see? It's a divorce paper." "No," he exclaimed, confused by the sudden request. "I get that, but why all of a sudden?" I explained to him that I had been thinking about it for a while and had finally made the decision to leave him. Andrew seemed taken aback, but reluctantly signed the papers. Now, I no longer need to support this man, I thought to myself. The last thing to do was confront Jess. Just before leaving the house, I asked her why she had been so cruel to me. After all, the mistreatment started when I told Andrew about my earnings. Surely, something about that must have upset her, I thought. "Jess, thank you for everything up to now," I said to her. Yeah, she replied dismissively. "The thought of not having to see your face anymore is refreshing." I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief at the thought of not having to deal with her anymore. "By the way, why did you treat me so harshly?" I asked her. "Oh, there's no deep reason," she replied nonchalantly. "I was just irritated that you earned more than Andrew. He told me, you know. At one point, you were earning $100,000. Earning more than your husband, what were you thinking? Normally, you should earn less to save face for your husband. Plus, Andrew was paying for the utilities and everything for this house, right? He must have been using his savings to pay for it since he lost his job. Unlike you, he's really a good guy." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. What is she talking about? I thought to myself, is she really that foolish? Is she really that foolish to think I was harassed for such a petty reason? And she's mistaken about Andrew paying for everything. I'm looking forward to seeing what happens after I leave. A husband and mother-in-law with no income. They will probably become unable to maintain their current lifestyle very soon. But I didn't say that and just left it unsaid. So that's the reason. Understood. A wife who can't respect her husband should leave, right? Well then, I'll be on my way. With that, I left my in-laws' house. On my way to my new place in the luxury high-rise condo, I stopped by the office to submit the divorce papers. Now I've completely severed ties with Jess and Andrew. Even if they come crying to me, there's no way I'm helping them. Arriving at my new place, I immediately started organizing my things. The apartment, being luxurious, was spacious, and I secured a considerably large space for my workroom. All right, time to work hard to make up for all the interruptions I've had. After roughly finishing unpacking, I immersed myself in work. A month later, my cell phone rang. Looking at the screen, I saw Andrew's name. What does he want now? Honestly, I was in the middle of work and initially ignored it, but he kept calling. How annoying. Irritated, I reluctantly answered the call. "What? I'm busy." "May, where are you right now?" "Where?" "At home working. I want to talk to you." "Can I come over?" "Huh? I have nothing to talk about with you. Why do I have to meet someone like him? Such a hassle." Just as I was about to dismiss him and hang up, I heard Jess's voice over the phone. "May, it's been a while, could we please meet and talk?" Jess, who was always so domineering, sounded quite desperate. They're really groveling and begging, aren't they? Reluctantly, I agreed to meet them. "I'll meet you, but it's a hassle to go out, so can you come here?" "I'll send Andrew the location." I ended the call after saying that. But what could be so important that they need to talk about it in person? While pondering this, I resumed the work I had paused. 30 minutes later, my home's intercom rang. It seemed they had arrived. "Yes," I answered. "We're here, and this place, it's incredible," Andrew exclaimed. "Did you come here to chit-chat?" "If so, leave." "No, sorry. Please let us in," Jess pleaded. Through the monitor, I could see Andrew and Jess standing outside. I let Andrew and Jess into my house after unlocking the auto lock. Shortly after, they rang my doorbell, and I allowed them inside. They looked around in amazement, asking if my house was a hotel. They seemed too shocked by the luxury of the room to get to the point. I asked them why they had come, wondering if they wanted to tour my house. They seemed too overwhelmed to answer, so I sternly asked them to leave if they didn't have a reason for being there. I sat on the sofa and spoke to them firmly. Then Andrew and Jess remembered their original purpose and began begging in front of me. They explained that they couldn't afford their living expenses and asked if I could help them out. I refused, reminding them that they had kicked me out and why should I take care of them. They argued that I lived in a nice house and could spare some money, but I reminded them of how they had exploited and harassed me in the past. As I spoke, they fell silent, unable to argue. I told them to leave and never come back, threatening to report them to the police if they did. They asked how they were supposed to live, but I didn't care. I had reached my breaking point and yelled at Jess louder than I ever had before. Realizing there was no more negotiating, Jess and Andrew quickly left my house. Their expressions when they saw the inside of my house were priceless. They used to be so overbearing, but now they came begging. I had no intention of helping them. They could struggle on their own. After they left, I returned to my workroom and continued with my work. A month later, I was still working hard, having bought this house through my own hard work. I had supported them financially while Andrew didn't bother to work and Jess harassed me, causing me to cut back on sleep and work while physically and mentally drained. I knew they would never understand or appreciate my sacrifices. A month later, I had planned to take it easy in the afternoon after doing a fair amount of work. Oh no, I just remembered. I hadn't opened the living room curtains yet today. With that thought, I finished my work and headed to the living room. As I opened the curtains and looked out the window, I saw Jess and Andrew wandering around the grounds of the high-rise condo. Isn't that Andrew and Jess? Have they come back again, not having learned their lesson? But they weren't ringing my doorbell. They were just wandering around. They must be wary of the threat I made. Well, it can't be helped. I might as well throw them a lifeline. Thinking so, I called them while looking down at the two from the window. Hello? What are you doing? I asked. Nay? What do you mean? What are we doing? Andrew replied. Don't play dumb. I can see you from my apartment right now. Remember what I said? I'll call the police. Wait, we're just wandering. But we're not doing anything, right? Jess chimed in. Well, that's true. Their actions are totally suspicious, though. Then what are you doing here? Let me guess, you came to ask for my help, right? Well, yes, but since then, I've reflected on my actions and found a job, though it's just a temporary one. I haven't received my salary yet, so I was wondering if you could lend us a little. I'll definitely pay you back when I get paid. So you can do it if you try. But it's because you only act when you're desperate that I gave up on you. Wow, you got a job, huh? Good for you. If you're working, why don't you borrow from a payday lender or something? Bye. I said that and unilaterally ended the call with Andrew. About an hour later, I heard the sound of police sirens. Could it be? Feeling a bit excited, I looked outside to see Andrew and Jess being stuffed into a police car. Ah, so it's come to this. I hadn't reported them. Probably other residents had seen them as suspicious and called the police. Since that incident, they seem to have stopped relying on me, and I haven't seen them since. I deleted Andrew's contact information and changed my cell phone number. From now on, I'll earn for myself, live without being disturbed by anyone, and never be bothered by them again.